Moving on, Nepal's Gen Z group has demanded the arrest of former Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli over his alleged role in a shootout that killed 19 people.
Nepal finds new calm this weekend with the appointment of a temporary leader.
Nepal is in turmoil, and it's not the politicians leading the charge, it's the youngest generation. Across the country, streets have filled with students and young citizens demanding change after a government crackdown on social media spiraled into one of the largest anti-corruption uprisings in years. So, what's really happening in Nepal right now? The spark that ignited Nepal's Gen Z revolt. In early September 2025, a sweeping decision by the government of Nepal triggered the largest wave of protests the Himalayan nation had seen in over a decade. The Ministry of Communication and Information Technology ordered the shutdown of 26 social media platforms, including global giants such as Facebook, X, YouTube, and Reddit. Officials insisted that the ban was necessary to enforce new regulations, including a digital services tax and stricter VAT measures on foreign e-service providers. Yet the timing and scope of the restrictions raised suspicions. Critics accused the government of using taxation as a cover to silence dissent, particularly because the ban followed online trends mocking the children of political elites for flaunting their wealth and privileges. For young Nepalis, especially those in Generation Z, the move was not just a technological inconvenience. Social media had become central to their daily lives, education, activism, and even livelihood. With 33% of the country's GDP coming from remittances and a youth unemployment rate around 20%, many young people supplemented incomes through online work, freelancing, and digital entrepreneurship. Cutting them off from these platforms meant not only curbing their voices, but also threatening their economic survival. This frustration intersected with existing anger over corruption, nepotism, and widening inequality. The viral Nepo Kid trend, highlighting the luxurious lifestyles of elite families compared to the average Nepalese income of about $1,400 per year, further amplified resentment. When authorities blocked the very platforms where young people expressed and organized their frustrations, the stage was set for mass unrest. The role of youth and digital coordination. The demographic weight of Nepal's youth was pivotal. With a median age of 25, the country's population is overwhelmingly young, and this generation's affinity for online spaces shaped the trajectory of the protests. While previous uprisings in Nepal had been led by political parties or unions, the 2025 Gen Z protests were largely decentralized, digitally coordinated, and youth-driven. The non-governmental organization Hami Nepal emerged as a focal point of online mobilization. Known previously for earthquake relief projects, Hami Nepal repurposed its networks for political coordination. Its Discord servers and Instagram pages became rallying hubs where participants could join freely, discuss strategies, and share updates. The openness of these platforms also made them vulnerable to infiltration by trolls and outsiders, but it underscored how different the protests were from past movements. Inside these digital spaces, discussions ranged from peaceful march routes to more militant tactics. Some channels reportedly hosted conversations on disabling security infrastructure, crafting incendiary devices, or disrupting transportation networks. While the majority of participants advocated nonviolent demonstrations, the government highlighted these discussions to paint the movement as extremist. Discord became so central to coordination that some described it as Nepal's virtual parliament. After police crackdowns escalated violence and fatalities, activists even used the platform to organize strikes, demanding indefinite school and college closures until accountability was taken for the deaths. The turning point in Kathmandu. The first massive demonstration erupted on the 8th of September in Kathmandu, with tens of thousands converging on Maitigar Mandala and the federal parliament building in New Baneshwar. Initially intended as a peaceful rally against the social media ban and corruption, the protest quickly spiraled out of control. According to organizers, the escalation began when a participant threw a rock at a CCTV camera. Security forces responded with extraordinary force, deploying tear gas, water cannons, rubber bullets, and eventually live ammunition. Videos circulated online showed horrific scenes: protesters with severe head and torso injuries, bodies lying unresponsive on the streets, and bloodied youths carried away by fellow demonstrators. Independent experts later identified the ammunition as 7.62 by 51mm rounds, a military-grade caliber, raising questions about whether armed forces had been deployed. That evening, the government lifted the ban on social media platforms, but the concession was too little, too late. The fall of Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli. By the 9th of September, protests had reached a fever pitch. Demonstrators stormed and set fire to some of Nepal's most symbolic political and judicial buildings, including parts of Singha Durbar, the Supreme Court, the president's residence at Sital Niwas, and the prime minister's official residence at Baluatar. Party headquarters of both the Communist Party UML and Nepali Congress were vandalized. As chaos engulfed Kathmandu, Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli attempted to consolidate control by ordering his ministers not to resign. However, mounting pressure from the streets and behind-the-scenes interventions by the Nepalese army forced his hand. Facing the possibility of a complete breakdown of state authority, Ali fled to an army barracks in Shivapuri before tendering his resignation. Reports suggest that Army Commander Ashok Raj Sigdel personally urged Ali to step down as a means of restoring order. The resignation did not immediately calm the situation. In fact, it emboldened protesters, who interpreted it as proof of their power. Yet with parliament dissolved in flames, curfews nationwide, and prisons attacked and overrun, the state teetered on the edge of collapse. Prisons, escapes, and escalation. One of the most dramatic developments during the unrest was the series of prison breaks across the country. Protesters attacked facilities in Kailali, Kaski, and Banki districts, resulting in the escape of thousands of inmates. In some instances, prisoners were intentionally freed, as in the case of Rabi Lamachain, who was released from Naku jail before the facility was set ablaze. In others, chaos and fire enabled mass escapes, such as in Kaski, where 773 inmates fled. The prison attacks underscored how quickly the protests had escalated from demonstrations to full-scale unrest. Security forces responded with lethal force in some areas, killing 5 inmates during a jailbreak at a juvenile correctional facility in Banki. These episodes complicated the narrative of the protests, with government officials portraying them as evidence of anarchy and lawlessness, while activists insisted that such escalations were symptoms of state repression. Discord as a parallel parliament. Perhaps the most unprecedented element of the Gen Z revolt was the way protesters turned digital platforms into decision-making bodies. With Ali's resignation and no clear successor, the Nepalese army approached Hami Nepal to propose nominees for an interim government that could oversee elections. What followed was an extraordinary experiment in digital democracy. On Discord, more than 100,000 users engaged in debates, polls, and discussions to select a consensus candidate. Dubbed the Parliament of Nepal by participants, the server simulated a nationwide election process, albeit informally and online. 3 names emerged as frontrunners: Sushila Karki, Nepal's former Chief Justice; Balin Shah, the Kathmandu mayor, and Kulman Gising, an energy reformist. When Shah reportedly failed to respond and Gising's candidacy lost momentum, the server voted overwhelmingly in favor of Karki. The 72-year-old former judge accepted the nomination, signaling her willingness to serve as interim prime minister. This selection process was emblematic of the Gen Z revolt: digital, decentralized, and rooted in a desire for transparency and accountability outside traditional party politics. The appointment of Sushila Karki. On the 12th of September, the army and political stakeholders formalized the protesters' choice. Sushila Karki was sworn in as interim prime minister, becoming the first woman to hold the office in Nepal. Her appointment marked a historic moment, not just because of her gender, but also because her rise symbolized the youth-driven demand for clean governance. Karki quickly prioritized reconciliation. She announced monetary compensation of 1 million Nepalese rupees, about $7,000 to families of those killed, and pledged support for the injured. In her first address, she called for unity, urging all sides to rebuild Nepal together. A national day of mourning for the victims was declared for the 17th of September. While her appointment calmed the streets and lifted curfews, questions lingered about the durability of such a transition. Could a consensus candidate chosen on Discord truly govern in a system dominated by entrenched parties and elites? Would the energy of the protests translate into structural reforms, or would it dissipate once immediate anger subsided? Casualties and human cost. The human toll of the protests was staggering. Official estimates put the death toll at 72, with more than 2,100 injured. The scale of destruction was equally vast, as fires gutted parliamentary buildings, courts, residences, and prisons. Families mourned young lives lost, many of them students who had marched peacefully before becoming casualties of state violence. The psychological impact was also immense. For many in Gen Z, the protests were a defining generational moment, an assertion of their power against an older political establishment seen as corrupt and unaccountable. Yet the trauma of bloodshed, loss, and instability will likely shape their political consciousness for decades to come. Regional and international reactions. The protests reverberated beyond Nepal's borders. In India, the unrest disrupted trade and movement across the open border, prompting Maharashtra's State Emergency Operations Center to issue a travel advisory on the 9th of September. Airlines including Air India and Indigo suspended flights to Kathmandu after Tribhuvan International Airport was occupied by the army and left in disarray. Neighboring states and international observers expressed concern about instability in a country strategically located between India and China. While foreign governments avoided overt intervention, the crisis underscored Nepal's fragility and its importance in regional geopolitics. Debates on monarchy and political future. One of the more surprising outcomes of the Gen Z revolt was the revival of debates about monarchy. Former King Gyanendra Shah called for calm, portraying himself as a neutral elder statesman. Among some protesters disillusioned with post-Civil War Republican governments, the monarchy briefly re-emerged as a symbol of resistance. However, most organizers urged against monarchist sentiment, warning that such ideas represented ultranationalism inconsistent with the movement's democratic ethos. Scholars debated whether the monarchy's invocation was genuine popular sentiment or a strategic maneuver by royalist groups to exploit the unrest. The Gen Z legacy. Even as calm returned by mid-September, the Gen Z revolt marked a watershed moment in Nepal's modern history. Unlike past uprisings driven by political parties or ideological groups, this movement was led by a digitally native generation demanding transparency, accountability, and fairness. It showcased how decentralized digital platforms can mobilize mass action, coordinate decision-making, and even propose leadership alternatives. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for more deep dive stories.